What's up guys, HCZ here, welcome back. Today I want to take a look at the meta because with the release of Power of the Elements, we all know how many good cards and how many good decks got released in this particular set. I feel like the changes in the meta are going to be dramatic, but we cannot tell for sure exactly the place of which these decks are going to be because we haven't had any premier events yet, so we're gonna have to wait mainly for the WCQ to see exactly which of these decks are the ones that are going to take over the meta. But for now, let's take a look at exactly how we think the meta is going to fold out. Maybe it could be completely different, maybe it could be exactly like that. We'll have to wait and see, but for now, these are the top 10 decks that you can expect to see the most moving forward in the upcoming format post Power of the Elements. Number 10, Marinces. Now, this deck, ever since it got the support from Duels from the Deep, has made a really good splash. This deck can do so much with so little. It can do one-card combos that can lead you to either unaffected monsters on the field. It can use Bahamut's are totally awesome. The deck can push for a lot of damage with a lot of beaters because the field spell beefs up all of its monsters. The deck is very consistent. It has searchable disruption. It's really powerful. It's basically the new age Salamangreat deck because Salamangreat, while though it had the tools to do basically what this deck does, what it lacked was the power to basically go for really big monsters because it was relying on access code just go for OTKs. This deck can bring out even defensive really big monsters that have interruptions. It can also push for OTKs just as easily, so this deck has basically replaced Salamangreat as one of the best decks of the meta because it can do what Salamangreat could do, but just a lot better. Number 9, Mathmech. Now, this is a deck I have really high hopes for. The release it got the support in Power of the Elements made the deck basically just appear out of nowhere because we knew this deck was getting a really good card in Power of the Elements. The deck had just done nothing before of that, but now a lot of people have started picking up the cards and basically playing the deck. It's a deck that already a lot of people don't really know what it does, so if you're looking to pick a deck that's going to catch people by surprise, then this deck might be the deck for you. It's a really good deck. It has Final Sigma to basically complement what Marinces can do with the unaffected monsters. It has a lot of extenders and people don't know what to cut against this deck, so it's going to be very difficult to get stopped at the right time, so your combos are going to go through. This deck can only get better. I put it number 9 for now because I'm just giving it the benefit of the doubt because we don't know exactly how well this is going to do going forward, but I just feel like this is one of those decks that if any deck in this list can move up slots, then this is definitely the one. Number 8, Branded Despia. Now, how the mighty have fallen. Now, this particular deck just have gotten a lot worse even before Power of the Elements was released because basically people just started moving over to punk versions, and then all those punk versions were super combo heavy, and this deck not keep up with them because one thing about Branded Despia is that people were not playing a lot of hand drops in the deck. If they were playing any, it was mainly for crossout targets. They were playing like one-offs, so the most important ones. So this is why this deck going second against combo decks, it's not the greatest. It was doing really well because we were not playing a lot of combo stuff back when this deck dominated, so it had an easier time doing its plays. But now maybe having 2 interruptions against this deck to stop like a polymerization and the branded fusion is enough to stop the deck, so it took a beating and it's now at number 8, but it might go up depending on how the meta falls because we know that other branded decks, even though Branded Despia is not the best version anymore, Tier Laments may give Branded some light. So yeah, even though Branded Despia are not the deck to play right now, and maybe Tier Laments will be the one to give Branded the hope it needs in order to be somewhat playable in at least as an engine in other decks. But Branded Despia, it's not the greatest anymore, but it's still a really good deck, so it deserves to be at the number 8 slot. But again, it was a lot better before, and now all those other decks are going to take its place as the best decks of the format. Number 7, Sword Soul. Now, Sword Soul is one of those decks that feels very similar to Sprite, but thing is, it's not as consistent as Sprite is, because Sprite can play around hand traps much better than Sword Soul, and Sword Soul, while being a mid-range slash combo deck because it does try to put up a lot of negates, it does play a lot of hand traps to back them up, it's something that can get stopped much more easily than Sprite because Sprites have all these extenders that come from the hand free, give you searches, give you interruptions. Sometimes maybe a Veiler and Moye against Sword Soul can be enough to stop them if they don't have Emergence or Longia in the hand. So Sword Soul, while a really strong deck, again, it's just getting replaced by a better version of itself from the new cards that we got in Power of the Elements, which is why even though people are still gonna play the deck, it's just not going to see the success it has seen up to now because there are just better options right now. Number 6, Exosister. Now, Exosister is one of the new decks that are going to be seen because it's not new, but the cards that it got Power of the Elements basically made it a deck. For that, the deck was very fragile, it didn't have one-card combos, it was very reliant on your opponent to move cards from the graveyard, but with Martha and Litania, the deck is just so much better than before, and it could actually be the anti-meta strategy of the format. If you want a comparison of the decks that we have right now from Power of the Elements, you can view Tier Laments are the spellbooks, you can view Sprites are the Dragon Rulers, and you can view Exosisters as the Evil Storm of the format. This deck is just going to see play by a lot of people because it has an effect that can basically Abyss Dweller your opponent, so it has a really good tier element matchup. It has a lot of banishes, so you can just banish the monsters the sprites put on the field, so they will not be able to use the extenders from the hand. If it gets to go, then it's a really unstoppable deck. But thing is, this deck does not get to go too often, especially going second, because sometimes keeping a totally for Martha in the hand can be enough to stop it, so this is why this deck is going to play a lot of hand drops in order to be able to survive going second. It's also another deck like Floowandereeze that can play Dimension Shifter. In the right matchup, Dimension Shifter, we all know how annoying and devastating it is, so being able to play that card is also a thing that will give you an edge over a lot of other decks, so I'm looking forward to seeing exactly how this deck performs. It could go up, it could go down, but it's something that people are definitely going to experiment with, especially at the beginning of the format. Number 5, Dragon Link. Now, Dragon Link can be played either pure or can play with Adventure. Both versions are very worthy of being at the number 5 slot, because Dragon Link is a combo deck that can do so much with so little. It can also play hand drops in order to back them up, searchable hand drops in that, because Chaos Ruler can add you copies of Veiler, so you can use them even if your board gets Droplet or Dark Ruler No More. It's something that can play around cards like Droplet, Dark Ruler No More, because it has the tools to basically have not only monster negates, but with cards like Dragon Maid stuff, you can basically chain the Dragon Maid Tiding card, and then you can chain Abyss on Droplet or Ruler, because you are not chaining directly Ruler or Droplet, you are chaining own cards, so basically you don't get frozen by those effects that don't let you choose to negate anything, because you cannot chain any monster effects. It does have ways to deal with that as well, so this is why Dragon Link is a deck that can play around a lot. It's a deck that can set up unbreakable boards. The release of Borderland just make this deck so much better, because now instead of a Heavenly Spheres on the board, you have a Borderland with interruptions, and Borderland not only is an interruption of its own, but it's a really difficult monster to deal with, especially against a lot of decks do not have outs entirely, so this is why this deck only got better, and it's definitely deserving of the number 5 slot on the list. Number 4, Floowandereeze. Now, the reason Floowandereeze is so high up on the list are for a couple of reasons. First of all, similar to Exosister, this deck can play D-Shifter, which is a card that if tier elements become very popular, then definitely this deck is going to see more play, because Shifter just outright destroys tier elements. They cannot play under Shifter. It's impossible, because all of their effects come from the graveyard. Also, this deck is really good at playing around interruptions, because it has cards like Adventure and Book of Moon play around cards like Veiler and Imperm. It has the chain blocking to play around Gamma and Ash Blossom. It's immune to Diddy Crow, because Diddy Crow is going to be a very relevant card in the following format, again because of tier elements, but this deck does not give an absolute damn about Diddy Crow, because it doesn't have anything in the graveyard. All of its monsters get banished when they leave the field, then you get them back to your hand, so Diddy Crow does nothing against you. And the win conditions that this deck has are still very potent to this day, because Barrier Statue, there's not another good win deck in the format right now, so basically this card can just destroy any matchup play. You can have cards like Apex Avian to protect it, you can have Rise at bounce cards, you can have Empen to just float down your opponent. Yeah, this deck is really good, and I feel like this deck is better than it used to be right now, just because of how the format is shifting. D-Shifter being such a powerful card means that the deck does have a really good hand trap to play against the meta, because once Branded Despia was the best deck, then Shifter was not doing that much against it. But if you're playing against tier elements, one Shifter can basically win you the entire game, so this is why I gave Floowandereeze the number 4 slot on the list. And now let's get to the top 3, the big 3 of the upcoming format. First, we have Punk at the number 3 slot. Now, this includes basically any version of Punk. We have Punk Therion, we have Synchro Punk, we have all of those versions that you can think of that can play Punk either as a big engine or a small engine with just teleport, with Adventure engine as well. This deck is really good, just because of how little Punk requires in order to do so much. With one teleport, you can basically mill 9 cards with Chaos Ruler and Zombie Vampire, get access to a Baron, and you haven't even used your normal summon yet. So yeah, this deck is absolutely ridiculous. As long as Fiber is a thing, or teleport is a 3, then Punks are just going to dominate the meta as part of any other deck you can see. You can splash this in so many different things, so yeah, you can definitely expect to see a lot of Punk versions of a lot of decks in the upcoming format. And moving up the list, we're going to have one more Punk version, but at number 3, I'm putting all of the other versions, because I feel like the other deck that I'm going to talk about right after is just one step ahead of all of those decks that are put in the number 3 slot. But again, really good deck. Punk being able to be splashed in so many different stuff gives the utility to be played in any single format depending on what you need. You can counter the meta with the engine you think is right. Number 2, tier elements. Now, I mentioned that Punk is a really good engine, then make that double, because tier elements are going to play Punk as well. It's a really good engine, tier elements, because Foxytune does not discard another card for cost, so all the tier elements are going to get their effects. Milling is the game for tier elements, so being able to mill 9 cards means that you're going to get a play 100% every time that you do the Punk combo. But tier elements are number 2, not just for the Punk version, but there are also other versions you can play. You can play branded tier elements, which is another thing that make branded see some play instead of just relying on branded Despia to be able to be good. So yeah, tier elements are a very versatile deck you can use in a lot of different engines. Use it, be able to get interruptions on the board, being able to make Winda as a lockdown, an extra negate with Drogostapelia, being able to go into really big boss monsters like Kaleido Heart. Yes, the deck is really good. They changed the field spell so that can actually pop cards, so it's a deck that does not lose to Mystic Mine, because Mystic Mine is still going to see some play as long as it's a 3 people are going to abuse it as much as they want. So being able to have an inherent out to Mystic Mine is also a really good thing for any deck to play in a competitive format. So Tearlament's big and number 2, maybe they can become number 1 deck. Those two decks at the top are very interchangeable. We're just gonna have to wait and see, because these decks, you're going to see them at event, then once one of the decks is going to be the top, then the other one is going to be in the next event. These two decks are just going to be the absolute kings of the following format, so it's very difficult to rank them, but I just feel like the first deck is a tiny bit better than Tearlands. And at number 1, everybody saw that coming, we have Sprite. Now, Sprite, it used to be tier 0 in the OCG until totally get banned. While I don't think it's going to be that bad in the TCG, because unlike the OCG, we do have a lot of variety and a lot of decks that can deal with Sprite, because in the OCG, everything else was guttered when Sprite and Tearlaments was basically released. They didn't have the adventure package, they didn't have anything, even Sword Souls were hit, branded were hit with limited branded opening and semi-limited branded fusion, but in this format in the TCG, we do have a lot of other decks that still have their tools to compete, so maybe people can find ways to answer those decks, and if they don't want to play one of those two decks, we're going to have more variety compared to the OCG. But again, Sprite is one of those decks that with just one card, it can do a lot of stuff. It's another deck that has a lot of extenders in the hand, play around hand traps like nothing. It can play itself 15 hand traps in order to be able to go second and basically whatever it wants. It's an amazing deck. It has inherent searchers, it has inherent disruptions. The deck is absolutely ridiculous. It can do loops with fiber to be able to even get hand traps from the deck to the hand by special summoning them field and then using them with Swap Frog to get them back to the hand, so it can even play around cards like Dark Ruler No More by having more hand traps in the hand, play around everything else. Yeah, this deck is absolutely amazing. While not as versatile as Tearlaments, I feel like this deck is just a bit better than Tearlaments just because of the amount of sheer pressure the deck can put, because you don't know when to hand trap them. Basically, everyone says that you can keep the hand trap for Gigantic Sprite, but the thing is, even if the Gigantic Sprite doesn't resolve, Toad is not the only thing this deck does. It has Red and Carrot to be able to have interruptions and a lot of hand traps in the hand. It has Smashers for Search of Disruption. This deck is absolutely amazing, and until the ban list addresses it, I just feel like this is going to be the best deck until we get really big changes in the ban list, which should not happen anytime soon because the deck just got released, so we're gonna have to get used to it for a little while. So yep, that's the video, guys. Comment down below of your thoughts of the upcoming format, if you think any other deck is deserving to be in top 10, or if you think the order should change in some of those decks. Let's have a discussion and see exactly which of these decks are going to dominate the meta, which other decks are going to be seen a lot by players, maybe as a counterpick to the best of these decks, or maybe as another deck that can basically do a lot of stuff without requiring much, which is basically what Yu-Gi-Oh is all about right now. These are usually the best decks of the format. So yep, that's the video. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and we'll see you next time.